Before we begin this desperate mother's account, I need to issue a warning. What you are about to see is a real excerpt from one of the videos she recorded, records of the presence that seemed to haunt her home. The recording was made with a low-quality device, and for safety the child's face has been censored. Watch only if you are certain that this type of content will not affect you emotionally.
My name is Elena, and I never believed in ghosts until 3 months ago. Today, as I record this account, my hands still tremble recalling what happened in our house. A house that had always been our refuge, our safe zone, but which transformed into a nightmare that still haunts us. I am Sarah's mother, a girl of only 9 who lost her hero 4 months ago. My father, her grandfather. He wasn't just an ordinary grandfather. He was the father she never had, since her own father abandoned her when she was only 2. Grandpa Eduardo filled that void with an unconditional love rarely seen nowadays. Our house is in a quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those tree-lined streets where houses have well-kept gardens and neighbors greet each other. But after what happened, even the sunlight streaming through the windows seems different, colder, as if something invisible had changed the atmosphere of the place forever. That late October afternoon, when we brought home the only thing Sarah asked for as a memento of Grandpa, I had no idea I was introducing something much more than furniture into our home. It was an old dark wooden wardrobe, about 2 meters high, which had belonged to my father for over 40 years. Its hinges creaked with a peculiar, almost melancholic sound, and inside it were still some coats, hats, and the characteristic scent he always wore. The first 2 weeks after we installed the wardrobe in Sarah's room were normal, or at least that's what I tried to believe. Sarah had chosen the darkest corner of the room to place it, right next to the window that overlooked the backyard. She said that there, Grandpa could watch the flowers he planted. A sweet phrase from a grieving child, I thought at the time. Our routine continued as always. I woke up at 6 in the morning to prepare breakfast and take Sarah to school, worked all day in the accounting office, and returned home in the late afternoon. Sarah did her homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner, and then we watched television together before she went to bed. But there were small things. Things any mother would notice, but which at the time I attributed to a child's natural grief. Sarah began to spend more time in her room, especially near the wardrobe. I would find her sitting on the floor, her back against the dark wood, doing homework, or simply looking out the window. When I asked if everything was okay, she would smile and say she was talking to Grandpa. Childhood grief, I thought. Completely normal. Childhood grief, I thought. Completely normal. I also began to notice that Sarah was sleeping better than she had since her grandfather's death. Before, she would wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling for him. But now, her nights were silent. Too silent, perhaps. When I peeked into her room before going to sleep, she was always in a deep sleep, turned towards the wardrobe, as if protected by something. And there was that smell. My father's characteristic scent, a mix of wood, sweet tobacco, and that aftershave he had used for decades, seemed to intensify inside the furniture, instead of fading with time. Sometimes, when I walked down the hallway, a slight breeze would bring that aroma, and for a moment, my heart would warm, thinking he was still around, looking after us. How wrong I was. How wrong I was. The first truly strange thing happened on a Thursday night, exactly 17 days after we installed the wardrobe. I remember the date because that's when I started writing everything down in a diary, something my therapist had suggested to process grief. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke up thirsty. The house was immersed in that dense silence of the early hours, when even distant traffic sounds disappear. I walked down the hallway towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. Creak, creak, creak. A rhythmic creak, like the sound of wood under pressure. I stopped immediately. The sound was coming from Sarah's room. My first thought was that she had woken up and was messing with something, but when I listened more carefully, I realized it was the sound of the wardrobe hinges. I approached her bedroom door, which was ajar. Through the crack, I could see Sarah sleeping soundly in her bed, completely motionless. But the wardrobe, one of its doors was slowly opening and closing, in almost hypnotic movements. Open, close, open, close. I felt my heart race. There was no draft in the room. The window was closed, the air conditioning off. I gently pushed the door open and entered. The moment I stepped into the room, the movement stopped completely. The wardrobe door remained ajar, as if watching me through the dark crack. I closed it firmly and checked the lock. It was working perfectly. Sarah didn't stir once throughout the entire situation. I returned to my room trying to convince myself that I had imagined everything, that perhaps the old wood was adjusting to the house's humidity. But the next day, when Sarah came down for breakfast, she made a comment that sent chills down my spine. "Mom, Grandpa told me you came into my room last night. He said you were worried." I hadn't told her about the incident. In the following weeks, our house transformed into a place I no longer recognized. The events began to multiply, each more disturbing than the last, as if something was testing the limits of our sanity. The temperatures in Sarah's room began to fluctuate inexplicably. I could be in the hallway, feeling the normal warmth of a spring day, but upon entering her room, a wave of cold would instantly envelop me. A damp, heavy cold that penetrated to the bones. The thermostat read the same temperature, but my body knew something was wrong. The wardrobe's creaks became more frequent. Not just at night. Now they happened during the day, too. I would be in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard that familiar sound. Creak, creak, creak. I would rush upstairs, but always found Sarah playing peacefully in her room, and the wardrobe completely still. But it was the shadows that truly began to terrify me. Out of the corner of my eye, I started catching movements that shouldn't exist. Shadows moving independently, as if they had a life of their own, especially in Sarah's room. When I looked directly, there was nothing. But in the reflection of the dressing table mirror on the surfaces of the turned-off television, I saw dark figures gliding across the wall where the wardrobe stood. Sarah, strangely, seemed happier every day. She hummed in the mornings, smiled more, and had completely stopped crying over her grandfather's absence. When I asked how she was feeling, she would reply with a radiant smile. "Grandpa is taking care of me, Mom. He tells me stories every night." One night, around 3 a.m, I was woken by voices. Low, whispered voices coming from upstairs. I felt my blood run cold. I got up silently and went upstairs, each step creaking under my bare feet like an announcement of my presence. Sarah's bedroom door was ajar, and through it, I could see she was sitting on her bed, facing the wardrobe. She was whispering something I couldn't understand, as if she were having an intimate conversation. But what made me gasp in terror was realizing there were pauses in her speech. Pauses where she seemed to be listening for answers. Answers I couldn't hear. Answers I couldn't hear. The air in the hallway was heavy, dense like before a storm. And then I felt a presence, something watching me from behind. I turned slowly, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back at Sarah's room, she was lying down, sleeping soundly, as if the conversation had never happened. But the wardrobe, one of its doors was slightly open, and from the dark crack within, I would have sworn I saw 2 bright dots watching me, like eyes in the darkness. The moment that changed everything happened on a Friday, exactly 2 months ago. It was the anniversary of my father's death, 4 months since he had passed. Sarah had been strangely agitated all day, talking endlessly about how Grandpa was closer that day. Around 9 p.m, after putting Sarah to bed, I decided to do something I had been putting off for weeks. I set my phone to record video and positioned it discreetly in her room. I needed evidence of what was happening, for my own sanity, if nothing else. At 2:43 in the morning, I was awakened by a sound I will never forget. It wasn't the familiar creak of the wardrobe. It was something much worse, It was footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps walking through Sarah's room. The wooden floor creaked under an invisible weight, in a rhythm I knew intimately. My father's shuffling walk in the last months of his life, when illness had weakened his legs. I rushed to her room, and when I opened the door completely, what I saw made me question my own sanity. Sarah was standing in front of the wardrobe, but it wasn't her controlling her movements. Her arms were extended, as if someone were guiding her in a silent dance. Her eyes were closed, but she was smiling, a serene, peaceful smile that I hadn't seen since before my father's death. Both wardrobe doors were wide open, revealing an interior that seemed much deeper than physically possible. And then, I saw it. It was a silhouette, vaguely human, formed by shadows that seemed to move independently, like dense smoke. It had my father's height and build, but its contours flickered like black flames. The figure extended what appeared to be arms toward Sarah, and she walked slowly towards it. "Sarah!" I screamed, but my voice came out only as a strangled whisper. "Sarah!" I screamed, but my voice came out only as a strangled whisper. It was then that I heard the voice, a voice I had known since childhood, but distorted, as if coming from very far away through layers of reality. Sarah. Sarah. My father's voice. Unmistakable. Impossible. Sarah took another step towards the dark interior of the wardrobe, and that's when something in me broke. I ran towards her, grabbed her by the shoulders, and violently pulled her away from the furniture. The moment I touched her, she woke up, confused and disoriented. The wardrobe doors slammed shut with a deafening bang that echoed throughout the entire house. The walls shook, pictures fell, and then, absolute silence. Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Why didn't you let me go with him, Mom? He was calling me home." It was only later, when I finally had the courage to check my cell phone recording, that I discovered the most terrifying truth of all. The video had captured everything, every movement of Sarah, every second of the macabre dance, and most importantly, it had captured the voice. My father's voice calling for her was clearly audible in the recording. In the days that followed that night, I became an obsessive investigator. I needed to understand what had happened, what was happening to us. Sarah, strangely, returned to being a normal child during the day, but absolutely refused to enter her room. She slept with me, clutching my arm, whispering repeatedly, "He wants to take me, Mom. He says it's better there." That's when I decided to talk to my Aunt Margaret, my father's older sister. At 82, she still had a sharp memory and knew family secrets I had never suspected. When I told her about the events, I expected her to call me crazy. Instead, her face paled and she whispered, "The wardrobe. I told him to get rid of that thing years ago." It was then that I discovered the truth about that cursed piece of furniture. The wardrobe had not been bought by my father. It had been inherited. It belonged to his father, my grandfather, who died when I was a baby. A man who, according to my aunt, had become disturbed in the last years of his life. He had lost a daughter of only 7, my aunt I never knew, due to a high fever. "Your grandfather never got over Rosina's death," Aunt Margaret told me with tears in her eyes. "He used to say she visited him every night, that she spoke to him through the wardrobe. Your grandmother told me he spent hours talking to that furniture, calling for the girl. When he died, your grandmother wanted to burn the cursed thing, but your father insisted on keeping it." The revelation sent chills down my spine. And my father, your father was too pragmatic for such things. But now I understand why he always kept that wardrobe closed, only with old clothes he never wore. As if he were containing something. The consequences of this discovery were immediate and terrifying. That same night when I returned home, I found all the wardrobe doors and drawers completely open. My father's clothes were scattered on the bedroom floor, as if someone had desperately searched for something. and there was a new presence in the house. Not just my father's. Now I could feel two distinct presences. One familiar, loving, but persistent, my father. And another, a smaller, more fragile, but equally intense presence. A child. A girl who had died over 70 years ago and who, apparently, had never left. Sarah began to talk about the girl in the wardrobe, Rosina, although I had never mentioned that name. She said Rosina was lonely, that she had waited so long for a friend, and that Grandpa had promised they could play together on the other side. That's when I began to think that the terrifying truth before me was, my father wasn't trying to scare Sarah. He was trying to take her to keep company with the soul of a child who had been trapped in that wardrobe for decades, waiting for someone her age to finally depart in peace. I needed to make it stop and to protect my daughter. I needed to make it stop and to protect my daughter. The most difficult decision of my life came on a rainy Monday. I could no longer pretend I could handle it alone. Sarah was wasting away, not physically, but her soul seemed to be slowly sucked into that cursed furniture. She spent her days apathetic, staring fixedly at her bedroom wall, whispering to people I couldn't see. That's when I made a desperate decision. I called a moving company and, while Sarah was at school, had them remove the wardrobe from our house. I didn't tell them where to take it, just away. Very far away. I paid extra for them not to tell me its final destination. When Sarah arrived home from school and saw the empty room, the scream she let out still echoes in my nightmares. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was of absolute despair, as if I had ripped out part of her soul. She threw herself on the floor, exactly where the wardrobe used to be, and cried for hours. Between sobs, she repeated, "They are lost now, Mom. They are alone and lost, and it's all your fault." That night, and for several nights after, I heard banging on the walls of the house. Rhythmic, desperate banging, as if someone was trying to get in. Or perhaps, trying to get out. Sarah didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. When she finally spoke again, she was a different child. More mature. Sadder. As if she had lost something precious that she could never regain. She stopped mentioning Grandpa. She stopped smiling spontaneously. And, what breaks my heart the most, she stopped trusting me completely. Today, 3 months later, I still wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone is watching me. Sarah has nightmares again, but now they are different. She dreams of a dark place where two figures walk eternally, searching for a door they cannot find. A door that I closed forever. We moved house last week. A new house, with no stories, no memories, no ghosts. But I carry with me the terrifying certainty that perhaps I made the gravest mistake of my life. Because sometimes, late at night, when the silence is absolute, I still hear that familiar voice whispering my name. And the question that haunts me every night is always the same. What if they just wanted to say goodbye?
Sarah? Sarah?
What if I had forever separated a grandfather who loved his granddaughter more than life itself, from a child who only wanted to make one last friend before departing in peace? The weight of this doubt is worse than any haunting, because now I know there are things worse than ghosts. There is the guilt of having left lost souls even more lost, forever. And the worst of it all? Sarah will turn 10 next week. And yesterday, for the first time in months, she asked me, "Mom, where did you put Grandpa's wardrobe? I think I need to finish a conversation." And this is my story. The story of how a simple piece of family furniture almost cost me the most important person in my life, and how my decisions may have condemned innocent souls to wander eternally in search of peace. If you've made it this far, thank you for having the courage to listen to my account. I know it may seem impossible, too fantastical to be real. I would think so too, if I hadn't lived every terrifying second of this experience. But before you dismiss all of this as fiction, let me ask you a few questions that might make you reconsider. Have you ever inherited an antique object from a loved one? Something that belonged to someone for decades, that carries not only memories, but perhaps presences? What if that old piece of furniture in your room, that dresser from grandma, that family mirror, weren't just objects? What if they were portals to something you don't fully understand? When you're home alone and hear a creak, a subtle movement, are you really sure it's just the wood settling? Or is there a small part of you that knows, that feels, that there's something more? If this story touched you in any way, if it made you question your own inexplicable experiences, leave a like on this video. Your like tells me I'm not alone on this haunted journey. And please, tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something similar? Have you felt the presence of someone who passed away through a personal object? Your stories can help others who are going through similar experiences, or who need to know they aren't going crazy. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell, because unfortunately, this isn't the only story I have to tell. Other accounts are reaching me, other families living nightmares that shouldn't exist. And remember, the next time you inherit something from a special person who has passed, ask yourself, what else might you be bringing into your home? Good luck, and sleep well.